there's a difference between revealing and fishing. Right? In some cultures, you're going to get more revealing clothing. You go to Florida, you're going to see more skin than in Maine in the wintertime, right? It's just the way it is. And in some cultures, that way, and you could talk about whether that's modest or not, but you could tell when it's like, no, this is more than just a fashion statement or cultural thing. And it makes me mad. It's like, man, don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna look away on purpose just because I don't feel like being led around by the proverbial nose. And I'm almost like take offense to it. Like it's like, man, no, I'm gonna stare at the floor because I know you want me to look. Get away from me. Stop telling me what to do. That's why I've had to work with it in my head sometimes, and it comes up. It's just like, man, stop that, man. Respect yourself more than that. You're more than that. You're more than that. Your value is deeper than that. And yeah, you got it. I'll look. It's gonna be seen. It's impossible not to see. But yeah, that's the end of it there. And it feels powerful to look away, like just I don't know, stare at the chip aisle.
Been
I
wanting to buy
gamify
them
it.
chips anyways. I'll just
That's
pick up
right.
a bag.
That's
I've,
right. No, I meant to look over here. I'm not. I'm staring at the floor. Look at my. I gotta tie my shoes.
yeah, there's stuff that passes through us. I just think, and obviously we don't want anything to get on us, but I'm not afraid that something
No.
get on me because, just turn in and,
Right,
Right.
so there you go, right?
right.
Not
My intent
complicated.
is what would give it power anyway. And intending to not be aware of what's affecting me is as good a thing as an open door. But when I'm walking through something with intent and Yeshua, and I'm looking and I'm saying I'm in partnership, nothing can touch me.
Yeah. Well, that's part of that make me think about being always on in your awareness. Being
Okay.
aware of your thought life is important because you get to a place of comfortable, you're just in a mode, you get in your car and you just drive down the street and you let your mind just do its thing. That's where the entrapment comes, and the next thing you know, your eyes are glancing to something that distracts you, right? And that the idea is to be self-aware of be constantly on in your awareness of your thought life so that in the moment where that thing flashes, you're already on top of your thought life. So that it doesn't, oh, I'm not, yep, I'm just going to keep looking ahead. I mean, for just go back to your example of the chip aisle, I know a woman that's scantily clad coming down the aisle. If you're in
With
La La
intent.
Land, just thinking about whatever, your mind, you're not aware of your thought life, and that comes into view, you're going to be entrapped into that thought life, and you're going to entertain the thought for a while, right? Because you weren't in control of that. The verse there, the opposite would be you're continually aware. I know what I'm thinking about. I know what's going on in my thoughts right now. This comes in, that I can have the ability in that moment because I know my thoughts to turn at the chips.
Right.
Like I'm not looking at that because I know my thoughts. I'm aware. I'm self-aware, and you have to be on like that. And it's something that has to become second nature. And we are very automaton in society, and that's where entrapments. That's where we get led by the proverbial nose because we're not self-aware of our thought life. And it feels like when we start that journey to become self-aware all the time, it feels like a heavy lift. It's difficult. It's exhausting.
It's insane.
I mean, it's mentally exhausting to strengthen that muscle. And so, but you have to start. And as you begin to become self-aware,
Right.
it's second nature. You're constantly aware of all your emotions. I mean, not just being triggered by what you see, but the triggers of the emotions inside you. Now you're on top of them quicker. Things don't trigger you because you're self-aware. No, what? Like David says, why so downcast, oh my soul? He was self-aware of his emotions in the moment that he could speak to it to stop the situation and have a dialogue with his soul before it railroaded him, down some deep, dark alley And he's like, now I got to pick the pieces all up.
But now we find ourselves not walking in the real religiousness of everything and being okay with it. Just say, hey, we can go and we can do things, or we can look at things and have a different perspective now that we're more mature. We don't have to be afraid that that's going to get on us and that's going to jump on us, or that's going to somehow attach itself to us, because we know who we are.
There's some empathy right there. Man, facing myself with awareness and the knowledge that I have choice is the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. Ever. I mean, looking at myself without the idea or awareness of choice, that I'm responsible and who I am and all this other stuff, no big deal. But knowing that I am choosing all of my responses right now, all of them, every single one is my choice. And having the power to turn that lock and undo things, it's hard. It is real labor. And
Well,
I
and
know
that's
it
the
gets
difference
easier on
between-
some things.
That's the difference between being able to change an environment or room that you walk into or not.
Yeah.
When everybody else has no ability, they come right in, they get swept up in the emotion, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And you walk in and say, no, this ain't above the sun. And you're aware that you're being pulled in because you can feel the gravity of it. You're like, nope, right now I'm locking that in, and I'm not gonna get pulled into it. And on top of that, I'm gonna start emanating a different frequency to start shifting that room.
Yes.
Right?
Not just
Unless
a
you're
receiver.
self-aware of that, you can't do that.
No.
So that's why you've got to be in constant on mode with who you are, what you're thinking internally, so that you can be. I mean, that goes back to the idea of the quantum assignments. How are you going to be aware and be effective in a quantum assignment unless you are aware of your thought life? Like, I'm essentially going out my door, front door, and everybody I'm walking in contact with, I'm going to see where they're at and quantumly entangle with them.
Yes.
And then I've got to be aware of what the environment is, how it's affecting my thought life. Fear is like one of the biggest motivators to just pull people down the primrose path.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to say, hey, I'm not going to be a lemming. I'm not jumping over that cliff. But I have to be aware that it's pulling on my emotions. I have to be aware of the thought life. And it's interesting, it's not verbal. Most of the time it's pictorial, right?
Yes.
It's tied, it's fragrance of an emotion that waves over you, and your subconscious picks it up and you're pulled towards it. And you have to be aware of that, the granular level of that subtleness, the nuance of that emotion that's triggering a room, and say, oh wait, I feel something and it's not right.
Yeah.
The hair of my arm standing up, there's an emotion here that's going on in it. And so you've got to quickly readjust so that you can be effective and not be influenced by it. But that's all part of that self-awareness, head to toe, what's going on in my body, soul, and spirit all the time.
Yep.
So that I'm not pulled along,
And it's amazing how in the beginning it felt like I was going crazy. To see myself in an emotion and at the same time feel the emotion and then be aware of the emotion, and not dispassionately, but without the pull.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, but
There's a disassociation that goes on that you have to, at least what I do,
yes,
is I have to disassociate my emotion from my soul for a minute. I have to, or separate as a spirit being.
correct.
Really, I recognize my emotion, my soul is dealing with the emotion, and I disassociate from it.
Yep.
Turn to my soul and say, hey, I know what you're dealing with right now. Here's who you are. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And then as soon as I address it, the emotional impact that I'm feeling my body even begins to subsidize.
Yeah.
And then I'm able to come back in and say, okay, now we know where we're at. Let's move forward. But it takes time to sometimes faster, sometimes takes a little more time, depending on how much of an overcomer I am in that category. Still not quite an overcomer in some areas. In some areas, I'm like, I got this thing licked,
So you've
so-
overcome, there's a lot of things you've overcome, but that's nice, all those wonderful trophies, but there are just as many overcomings
Yeah.
happening in real time. So yeah, you've overcome that, but you're still working on these overcomings, right? Regarding this, Chris.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like it's all part of a bigger plan here.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that I'm a receiver and being aware of what I'm receiving, and then learning I'm a transmitter and being aware of what I'm transmitting. And
And
everything.
these are important things to start trying to teach our children too at a young age.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
pouring
they're
into
powerful.
pouring into that. Your emotions are not who you are.
Yep. Absolutely.
They're an expression of how you're feeling.
Right.
Feelings are valid, but
Yes.
to know you need to go, or you need to desire to be willing to go deeper to try to understand those things, so you, the real you, can be in
Right.
control of how you feel.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the deeper, greater conversation that
You've
needs to
you've
be had.
actually learned to attach those emotions in your soul as a pathway of what's supposed to happen. So it's always triggering. But then you
Right.
can relearn that that is your soul that is operating, but that is not your spirit. So
Correct.
calm that soul down and let your spirit come forth, because this is who you really are.
Yep. This is where I teach my boys to leverage the wheel over the emotion. In the circumstance where the heat of the moment or circumstance is too much, is to turn, yeah, the emotion's on fire. Right now, you're going to overcome the emotion you're going to will yourself into this thing. And then when the heat has subsided, then we could turn back and deal with why your emotions were doing it. Because a lot of times I cannot get them to calm their emotions whatsoever.
Oh yeah.
It's just impossible.
Right.
It's like
Yep.
it's like a tidal wave that just overcomes them. And so they have to, like I said, okay, I get it. You're feeling it, let it feel, but you're going to choose in this moment to will yourself to do this action. And then when it sunsets, then when we're all nice and calm, then we'll go back and talk about what happened. So the next time we know how to bring that back into control faster or avoid it altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, because
then-
probably right at that heightened moment, that soul is so in charge that
Yeah.
you can't even have a conversation.
And you don't even know what would satisfy it anyway. Like, even as the person experiencing the emotion, it's like, if I really thought about it, I don't even know what would have worked. What would have made sense? What would have been, what does satisfaction even look like in this moment when the emotions are gone and it's pure soul expressing hurt or dissatisfaction?
Mhm.
So you even lose connection with what would make you happy. It's a runaway train. And then we do this post-mortem. We get to go back and say,
Right.
did any of that work for you?
Yeah.
Like, did it do anything positive? Okay, you did that. You can see it doesn't work, right?
Right.
And it can't be the only thing, but that's an element of it. It's like, no, there's a real good reason for not losing control, because it never works
Right.
out.
That's right. And that's the reason. That's the thing. When their emotions are so heightened, there's no ability to reason.
No, there isn't.
There's no
Right.
control. It's like I ask questions. I've learned the hard way. So why are you feeling this way? I don't know. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Of course you gotta know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, okay, there's no reasoning.
What part of I don't know don't
Are
you
you not
know?
getting, Dad?
Okay, dude, that's
Is it
glad I
the
felt
N
alone.
or is it the O that you're confused about, Dad? I don't know.
Dude, I was associating a punishment. I was like, until you tell me what's going on in your heart,
Yeah.
there's punishment. And it was terribly explosive. It ramped everything up. And I was like, okay. Like, I gotta back off here. She really did not know in that
Yeah.
moment what she was thinking, and had no
Yeah.
idea on how to even communicate that if she did understand it. Like, there was, and so I was putting the screws on to putting her in a place where it was just
Right.
rabbit in a cage. And yeah, I understand that. I have to look back and know that I can also be in a situation where I'm feeling the emotions, and yet my spirit's like, in about 30 minutes, this is all going to blow over. And you're going to look back at this and go, wow, that was stupid. You know this, and yet at the same time, have those emotions
Right.
rolling around.
So the key
Right.
is not to react when they're reacting.
Exactly.
That's part of it. That's a good place to start. Because
Yeah.
your trigger just got triggered, and you're not going to need to go in the other room and re-trigger that trigger. So yes,
And I was thinking about, when Father talked to Cain and said, warned him, don't let your emotions rule you, don't let your passions rule you. The murder of Abel was a murder, it was a commission of emotions, right? And he was just embroiled in his emotion, and he acted out on that. And so I tell my kids all the time that, like, don't let your emotions rule you in your circumstances. Know what's going on. Be aware that your emotions are going on, and before you sin, bring that under control. Separate yourself from whatever you need to do to bring that in under submission, so that you don't cause harm and pain and break relationship. And they don't do it perfectly, of course.
No,
But
emotions are
training's
incredible
there.
engines. They just make terrible rudders.
Yeah.
There's power there.
Yeah,
If you can harness
there
it,
is.
you can harness it. When you
They're
harness
beautiful
it.
things. Emotions are beautiful things. They were
Yeah.
God intended for us to have them, right?
Yeah.
And that's if we could figure out how to be excellent and experts in our emotions, I think we would solve a lot of the world's problems.
Yeah.
For ourselves.
Manifest and further manifest in reality by that quantum space, my thoughts and my what I'm broadcasting has a greater effect. I mean, we're running straight from spirit to science. Yeah, this isn't even a question anymore. You don't have to have faith to believe that we control the world with our awareness in ways we never thought possible. Like, you don't even have to have faith for that anymore. What an amazing time.
Emotions are what tell you whether you're going to get out of bed or not.
Yeah.
Really, you wake up in the morning, I feel like crap. I don't like today. I don't like the future. I'm just going to stay, but pull the covers back. I don't want to go to work today. Those are all emotionally driven choices, influence. And so, if you've got a good day coming, you're like, I'm up before the sunset. I'm coming out. It's going to be an awesome day. It's all emotions. Those that rule our choices more than we realize. There's so ingrained and granular at every little thought, sub thought that it's tied into, that it's amazing how they're entangled. And if we can learn to rule our emotions like we're intended to steward them and to leverage that massive engine, as you call it, we can actually accomplish what's on our scroll. And that's really, fear is the biggest one, right? When we talk about our destiny scrolls that Yahweh has given us to do, fear is what keeps us from actually manifesting that in the earth. And the thought life produces the action, but the thought life is created by the emotions. And that's is interesting, because the Hebrews 4:12 talks, the reason why Yeshua is that butcher knife that goes in and pierces the heart, is that thoughts and intentions, the thoughts are the emotions. And actually the Greek word is rooted in the idea of an emotion, whereas the intention is rooted into the logic and the reason side of things. And so when he goes in and divides the heart, he pierces the innermost being, he's going to separate the emotion from the thought or from the reasoning, so that he can deal with and clean, because that's what the butcher knife is doing, is cleaning the meat, cleaning the emotions so that they can be properly stewarded to produce the thought life that will then create the manifestation in the earth of the sons and what they're intended to do. So it all goes back into this core of the heart of the emotion that rules it all. and influences the course of man throughout his day, throughout his life. So it's key to start early with children, to teach them how to manage their emotions, to steward them, to leverage them, to make them their greatest asset
Yeah.
for creating in the earth.
As parents or even grandparents, here we go with that scripture, to obey your parents. That's why if we're not teaching the children so they have something to obey, to learn, to be able to take in and will help them to understand and to be mature adults, then we're failing, So these are the things that we are to teach so they have something to obey, to help them to live a long life, to fulfill their scroll. So it's an inheritance that we are getting, maturing in and passing it on down to our children and to our grandchildren.